Serious people who have had somebody die for you. What is your story?
My English may be weird, I am sorry. I don't know if this counts and I don't want to go into detail, but my mother took me when I was 8 years old from Sinuiju, North Korea with a refugee group to the north of the border of China and North Korea and fled to Thailand and then to South Korea. The important thing is that my family, father and my extended family still lived in Sinuiju. They did not want to leave due to fear of capture and fear of the United States propaganda. So my mother took it in her own hands. Most likely my family has perished for my mother and my actions. My mother towards the end told me that longer we stay alive, the bad memories that we have will slowly be replaced by new good memories. We just have to stay alive. My mother has since passed away. She became deranged and stressed that led to her death at an early age, and I since moved to the United States after graduating at Seoul National University in English and Business International. Because of my family's sacrifice I can have a somewhat normal life, but I can never forgive myself for my mother and my actions, and I have never told anyone. I don't deserve this life, but I have to live with it.
My brother jumped in front of his wife when a maniac was trying to run them over. My brother was killed on the 15th of November 2015 in Eugene, Oregon while on a weekend getaway. He and his wife had just finished breakfast and were walking back to their car to go back to the place they were staying. As they were crossing the road, a man in a Toyota Highlander who had just beat his parents with a baseball bat, killing the father and permanently injuring his mother, decided to drive into my brother and his wife at full speed. According to the police reconstruction and witnesses, my brother put his body in front of his wife's and took the brunt of the impact. He was killed instantly and my brother's body slammed into his wife, breaking nearly all her bones on the left side of her body. She lived. Rip Mark J. Sanford. A truly amazing man, brother, friend, son, stepfather and husband.
My mom was sick and we had the option to get her dialysis, everything that costs thousands and would bury our whole family in debt but wouldn't heal her or ensure that she will live long, or she gives up and dies. She gave up and died. She saved us lots of stress and money, and in turn I lost my mother at 16. Edit. Sorry for the confusion. I live in the Philippines.
Sorry, this is another not me, but when we were 7, my best friend's mom was at a bar not far from where we grew up. I guess a guy there was getting really rowdy and the management asked him to leave. As he was being kicked out, he drunkenly yelled something along the lines of, "I'll come back and kill every person in this place." I don't think anyone took him seriously, but later that night he returned with a gun and opened fire on the people in the bar. Her mom ushered some of her friends into the kitchen to hide. She got them all into a pantry, but he came in and caught them. He shot her in the head and moved on to the rest of the bar. She died protecting her friends. A few weeks later, at a different bar in a different state, my friend's dad was shot and killed also. She was orphaned at 7 years old and was then raised by her grandmother. We don't talk about it very often, but on holidays like Mother or Father's Day I know I need to check in on her. One day I came home and my fiancé was gone. Detectives finally came and told me they found his body at the place he proposed to me at. They strung me on that it was a murder for months until they released his goodbye letter. He shot himself in the mouth, through the brain, because I'm not good for you. I want you to be an amazing mother and I want child's name to have a good father figure. It's been amazing watching you grow into who you are. So here I am years later, still freaking confused and hurt that he says he killed himself for me and for my daughter. Still not healed and never will be. I know this isn't what I wanted, but it's what I got.
Not me personally, but it did affect me. For those who live in the US, you may have heard about this, as it made national news. I used to work at an elementary school, and one day during dismissal time, one of the parked school buses suddenly jumped the curb towards a group of children. The principal was not too far behind them and pushed them out of the way just in time, before the bus hit her and killed her instantly. I was there when it happened. That was the bravest and most selfless thing I have ever seen anyone do, and proved her character and how passionate she was with working with children.
I was involved with some pretty sketchy people as a teenager and was part of a skinhead crew for several years. I'm no longer a racist or part of that lifestyle. When I was 14, I leaving a show with a friend and walking to the bus stop because neither of us had our driver's license yet. A few guys came and started hassling us because our clothes and look made it obvious what we were. When he got swung at, he fought back and they all piled up on him. I tried to pull one off and they turned on me and got me down on the ground. He ended up pretty much wrapping himself around me to protect me. I don't remember much, but I had some head injuries and a collapsed lung from several broken ribs. and had trouble shielding myself. I lost consciousness and woke up in the hospital, where I find out he died because we were both on the ground being kicked with steel-toed boots for a long time before anybody intervened. Only a few people know the story, because I don't like sharing that part of my life, and most of our friends who knew turned on me when I left that lifestyle. His parents blamed me, and I don't even know where he's buried because I was in the hospital during the funeral. The insane part was starting my freshman year of high school a couple months later like nothing had happened. Ita. In case any of this resonates with anyone and you'd like to leave a hate group but need support or help planning, these are some good people. Life After Hate, Exit USA.
We sold drugs, and let's call him Jay. I got into it to help him out, but it was my choice all the way. We were just kids. I was 15. On our days off, we posted up outside a liquor store and just hung out, talked about whatever came to mind. Maybe we had some customers pass by, put some work in, but that wasn't why we hung out there. It was quiet, nobody bothered us much, and we got to just chill. Apparently he had a reputation I wasn't aware of with some other crew, because one day I saw a car around the corner after sunset with no lights on. They didn't stop, but slowed down around the store, and I thought, alright, sketchy customer, get the bags ready. Then the window came down and I saw the barrel stick out. I froze, but Jay was quick, got in front of me and brought me down while I just heard 2 shots, and then the car speeding away. I got grazed, but he got hit in his midsection, and in the head. He was a lot taller than me, so the headshot missed me completely. He didn't die immediately. I held him and called 911. I don't remember talking to the operator. I just remember looking at him and being able to tell the second he died. It really is a lights out moment where they just aren't there anymore. I've recently learned that the name for what I did after that was called keening. Moaning or screaming in response to someone's death. I just yelled and yelled, cried and screamed. It's been 12 years and I'm fine now, but I keep his memory with me and realize that we put ourselves in that danger. So I take more responsibility for the situations I put myself and my loved ones in. Edit. This is my most popular post. I do appreciate the well wishes and condolences. To be politely brief, thank you all.
My mother essentially died for me. I was 3 months old. My mother was giving me a bath in the kitchen sink. My 3-year-old brother was in a high chair having dinner. My father had just come home from performing a home inspection and was finishing his paperwork downstairs before coming up to dinner. He heard my mother cry out his name, in a tone that was off, is how he put it. He sprung from his chair, ran up the stairs to the kitchen to find my mother holding me in the sink with her head down. He snatched me from her hands. She immediately collapsed on the floor unconscious. She died 3 days later in the hospital of a cerebral hemorrhage. Her last act was to keep me from drowning in the kitchen sink. My brother witnessed it all and was scarred for a long time. I never knew my mother, but that is the personification of a mother's love. Edit, because I suspect people will ask. I've been told that in the months leading up to her death she would fall into essentially comatose sleeps, was tired all the time, headaches, etc. They chalked it up to postpartum and having a newborn and a 3 years old. But she had probably had this brain bleed for a long time prior to that fateful December day. But there's a twist. 30 years later, my daughter was born in the same hospital she died in. She has her grandmother's name. Life's full circle. Edit part. Wow, first time gold. THX stranger.
Had a moment in Iraq where 2 helicopters worth of soldiers and I were dropped off and got immediately fixed behind a mud wall. Every time we tried to move, the enemy would pin us back. On either end of the wall we had soldiers rotating out to provide suppression before reloading. Our situation was precarious at best. We were a 45-minute helicopter ride from any reinforcement. I was one man in from the end of the wall controlling the attack aircraft when a squad leader wiggled in, giving me more cover and allowing him better control of the soldiers providing fire. This went on. We couldn't gain an advantage over the enemy, and eventually a piece of shrapnel from an RPG hit the squad leader in the head, killing him nearly instantly. The fact that he basically died in my place was not lost in the moment and won't be for the rest of my life. I barely knew him, but I think about him every day. The randomness of combat gives me some solace, though I often second guess my decisions and whether or not something could have been done to better afford him protection.
He was a stranger. His death saved me and 3 others. The circumstance surrounding his death will never be completely known, as mistakes were made during his medical care. At the time of his death, I had already been on artificial heart for 11 months and was probably about 2 weeks from death myself. It had been a 3-year journey for me and my family. Getting listed for transplant and then sitting on that list was grueling. I was simply done. I received his heart on the 11th of January 2014. Although the recovery still goes on, I'm alive and enjoying my life. His name was Fatim, and I now know his family.
My father was an extremely hard worker, worked 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. 6 days a week. Then one day he had a heart attack and was dead for a few minutes. He was never the same after that. He changed. It's hard to describe, but he wasn't the same. I was 13 at the time he came into my room and we were playing PS2 SOCOM online. He said to me he didn't want to come back after he died. That wasn't his decision, it was the doctor's. Then he told me how if he were to die our family would be fine. He had hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of tools that he told me the company Snap-on would buy back. He also talked about other things, but this stuck out the most. A few months later he killed himself. It's left a tragic for my family and I feel so bad for them all. Now it's 13 years later and my siblings are still messed up. We would trade anything in the world for him, but I try to remember that was his choice.
I was on a trip at Yosemite National Park. We had hiked up Vernal Falls and were just enjoying the view when a girl got swept into the water heading towards the falls, so her friend jumped after her and another friend jumped after him, all trying to save each other, and all three went over.
When I was 7 years old, my mother and I got into a car accident. I was asleep in the front seat wearing no seat belt. She saw the oncoming car approaching and threw herself on top of me, saving me from flying through the windshield but killing her instantly. I think about her every day and I want to live to tell her legacy. Her name was Jennifer Lee.
I have been suicidal for a couple of months when I was 21. I guess it's always been there, but some things in my life triggered it. I knew I didn't want to die, but something inside me was telling me it's the right choice and that no one really wanted me in their life. So I started to plan my suicide, without anyone knowing. Around that time, my sister-in-law got sick and passed away right on New Year's Eve, and suddenly I got 2 small children to care for. At first, I didn't know what to do. My plans were basically changed super fast. I didn't have time to think on what just happened. But these children changed me. I started to see that yes, I am worth something and needed, and nothing makes me cry so much than thinking of dying and leaving these kids with more death in their life. I don't know if it counts or not, but I was basically saved by these kids and their mom.
Dog story. Had a border collie named Rascal growing up. He was walking with us while we walked a couple of our friends home. Our neighborhood was super safe, but there were these 2 really mean Rottweilers that were barely contained by a decrepit fence along the road back to our friend's house. Every time we passed by them they would lunge at us, hitting the fence, snarling. Well, we were walking past them, and that particular day, when those dogs lunged, the fence didn't hold. Our sweet pupper jumped between us and the Rottweilers before they could tear us apart. Each of those Rottweilers weighed nearly double than any of us kids and quite a bit more than that compared to Rascal. But Rascal kept them at bay until a neighbor came running to our rescue. At first the neighbor tried to beat the dogs away with a 9-iron. That didn't work, so he resorted to a taser before they backed off. Turns out those poor dogs had been trained to be fighters. Their owner wound up in jail over the entire thing. Rascal didn't make it. It was tragic, but I am so grateful to that beautiful, wonderful dog for saving our lives. As well as our neighbor, I know I'll see him again someday. I don't blame the dogs who killed him, and I know some wonderful Rottweilers, pit bulls, etc. But collies will always have a special place in my heart.
When I was in 5th grade, a girl in my class, we'll call J, was at a lake with her cousin and another girl in my class, we'll call M. None of them could swim. The cousin went too far in and was drowning, so J went in after to save her. M tried to get some adults' attention to help her friends, but they all thought it was just kids goofing around. Both J and her cousin drowned that day, and M has always carried a lot of guilt over what happened. I've also always wondered about why they were at a lake unattended when none of them could swim, and how the adults felt after they learned 2 kids drowned and they ignored their friends' pleas for help.
It might not count since it wasn't a person, but I think it keeps with the spirit of the question, so here goes. When I was about 10 or so, we lived on a farm. We had an Australian blue heeler named Smokey. He was an amazing dog, full of love for anyone he met. Smokey lived in a huge pen behind the barn, and it was my job to feed him and get his water when I got out of school. So one day I go out to the pen and start to open the gate. Smokey was acting very strange. He was pacing back and forth, the ridge of fur on his neck raised, and when I made a move to step over into the pen, he growled at me. This was new. Smokey had never even growled at me when we were roughhousing, so something was up. I kinda stepped back as he bared his teeth at me. I was scared, and the first thing that crossed my mind was that he had been bitten by something rabid. So I closed the gate and start walking around the pen. As I moved away from the gate, he trotted along the fence, tongue lolling, happy grin on his face, just like always. At this point I was super confused, but decided just to push the damn dog out of the way and feed him whether he liked it or not. So I go back to the gate. Smokey follows, and once again as I made to step in, he starts growling. I was only around 10 at the time, but he wasn't a huge dog, so I kinda pushed him with my foot to get him out of the way. And Smokey bit me. He lunged up and bit me right below the knee. I was wearing jeans so it didn't break the skin, but I was scared crapless of my old friend. I fell backwards out of the pen and then ran for the house. I told my grandma something was wrong with Smokey and that he had tried to bite me. She too was afraid of rabies, but since there weren't puncture wounds on me, she decided to wait until my dad got home to figure out what to do. He got off work about 2 hours after this happened, and immediately went out to the pen. He found Smokey dead, lying pushed up against the gate like he had been blocking it. In the lean-to where I would have gone to get Smoke's food, he found not one but 2 huge rattlesnakes. When he looked over the dog's body, Smokey's face had swollen around the cheek. He had been bitten. I know it doesn't carry the same weight as if a human had consciously decided to die for me, but I know my good boy was keeping me out of that pen for a reason. Edit, even thought I'm leaving it in. I would like to recant the last statement, about Smokey's sacrifice not carrying the same weight. It's disrespectful of his memory. Smokey would have carried all the weight we threw on him and more.
Not me of course, but a family friend with his wife. His wife had cancer, but was treatable through chemo and stuff, and thus he was always in the hospital with her for the last 3 months being company for her. That he eventually lost his job cause he just wanted to be with her. The wife didn't know any of this and just assumed he was given time off given the circumstances and such. Eventually, she did find out and boy was she angry at him. How you gonna pay for the house or the hospital bills when I'm out blah blah blah. I was visiting her that day in the hospital that day when she found out. Anyway, she demanded the hospital to stop treatment that exact date because she didn't want him to go to debt for her. She passed a week later surrounded by her family and friends. Everyone was giving the husband a hard time cause technically, she passed for his sake. He eventually was able to recover, but he is very much a recluse now and he blames himself for her death.
My mom died giving birth to me. I didn't find out about the circumstances of her death until I was 7 and my aunt said something about it to me. It messed me up for a while. I often wonder what my life would have been like if she was around. I had very little female influence in my life. I was raised by my dad and 5 brothers. Dad just treated me like one of the boys, so I grew up working on cars and motorcycles. My dad has never dated anyone since. That sometimes makes me sad too. I look at all the joy my husband brings into my life and want that for him, but I think he is just done with that part of his life. My brothers will sometimes tell stories about her. It's really the only way I know anything about her. There are some pictures around too. People tell me I look just like her, and have the same attitude. I just have to take their word for it. I'm older now than she ever was. I look at all the things going on in my life and I feel incredibly guilty for taking that away from her. It makes me want to live my life in a way that I think would make her proud.
When I was around 12 in the 80s, I was vacationing in South India in summer with my parents at the remote village they were from originally, where violent family strife was and is pretty common, especially over land and caste/clan differences. There was a family feud going on over some property in my father's name, so a few thugs beat me up by the river where I was playing with my cousins. My father was a brute and he found out who was responsible and beat the crap out of 2 men in the rival faction. In retaliation, a group of 5 to 6 men cornered him by the same riverbed where I was assaulted and hacked him to pieces and left his body parts stuck in the silt there, according to eyewitnesses. I could not bear living in the country anymore and studied my ass off to become an engineer and moved to the US in early 2001. I'm happily married with a wife and 2 beautiful children and have never visited home again. This is my home now. The empathy and support system from different specialists here and in general that I get from Americans make me pray for the US every day of my life.
My grandfather at the time was 94 years old. My 4-year-old daughter got the flu. which she then gave to me. I was homesick with my daughter and I couldn't even take care of myself, let alone my daughter. My grandfather took care of the both of us. I remember waking up to him covering me with a blanket like when I was a child. He ended up getting the flu from us and his respiratory system couldn't take it. He passed because he took care of me and my daughter, and it makes me cry every time I remember that.
Not in the same light, but I would have never been born had my brother not died a few months after his birth. My parents had me to replace him. It's pretty morbid when I actually get around to thinking about it, so I usually try not to. Edit. Wow, I left for a few hours after making that message and got nothing but support and positivity from everyone. I appreciate it.
I tried to shorten this as best I could, but it's still crazy long. I'm sorry. October 13, 2011, my aunt and uncle invited me to come down with them for a wedding party they were having at their house in Logan for one of their friends. I accepted, packed my stuff to stay for a weekend, and got into their car. We were just chatting while driving through Logan Canyon from my house to theirs. It was nice because I hadn't really talked to them since I moved up there. Well, all of a sudden I hear my aunt say, "Steve, Steve." I look up and see a red truck right in front of us. It hits and I black out. I wake up in a lot of pain and everything smelled weird and I couldn't talk. My aunt gets out of the car and is panicking and asking if my uncle and I are okay, which I'm still surprised that she could to this day because she had a broken disc in her back. My uncle had died on impact. I learned later that he turned the car just in time to take the full brunt of everything. Something that still makes me very uncomfortable is recalling this event. I can still clearly remember him breathing, but it was gurgling and like he was trying to breathe. Apparently his brain had split in two or something. I don't know if that's a thing that can happen. I just remember being told that. I get upset thinking about it. I feel like I heard him dying. Everyone thought I walked out of there okay until a few days later my intestines burst because a portion of them had been killed. Though I walked out of the car with broken glasses and a bruised arm, somehow no broken bones. I tried looking up articles on the accident. This was the only one that really sums everything up. Article: here's some pictures of the crash. 1, 2, 3. I don't know how relevant it is, but my father killed himself for me because my mother left him. Kinda fricked up and I was only 5. My mother left him, but she took me with her.
During a strong earthquake, my grandmother used her body to protect a 4-year-old girl. A wall collapsed and fell on them. I'm told she broke her hip, an arm, and her skull was open. She bled to death and passed from a heart attack. When they dug them out, all she kept asking about was the little girl and saying she's fine. The little girl thankfully survived with a broken arm but couldn't understand what happened to my grandmother.
My father's best friend growing up passed away before I was born, but in an absolutely heroic manner. My parents and godfather, Glenn, were rafting along the Colorado River in the early 90s. Following a large section of rapids, they decided to take a break along the shore. Shortly after, they heard screams for help from upstream. Closer to the rapids, a young boy had fallen out of a raft without a life jacket on. Glenn rushed up the shore with his life jacket and jumped in the white water, swimming towards the boy. He was able to take his own life jacket off, attach it to the boy, and fasten it before he was pulled down by the current. My parents were quite distraught for some time after. They hold Glenn in a different light in their minds, and decided to give me, their first son, a part of him. My middle name is Glenn. I'm very proud to have had someone like that as a direct influence on my life.
Azaz Hassan, 15, was with friends outside school when they spotted a man wearing a suicide vest. Despite the pleas of his fellow students, he decided to confront and capture the bomber, who then detonated his vest. His cousin told the BBC. Azaz is being hailed as a hero and an outpouring of praise on social media. As a result, he saved hundreds of people's lives. I was not one of them, but this hero's story needs to be shared. Edit. My son made his mother cry, but saved hundreds of mothers from crying for their children. Mujahid Ali. Azaz's father is quoted as saying,
I got permission to tell this story. My cousin was swimming in a seemingly calm part of a river with a large group of people near his college. At some point he went under the water and wasn't coming back up. Under the surface was a whirlpool that had caught him and wasn't letting go. His best friend dove in to save him and managed to get my cousin out of the whirlpool, but sadly got stuck himself. My cousin wasn't breathing when they pulled him out, and they spent several minutes before they could revive him. He's okay now. Sadly, his friend didn't make it. I never knew the kid, but I think of the sacrifice he made to save my cousin all the time and will be forever grateful for it. Edit. I'm blown away by the support from this community. Thank you for your thoughts and well wishes. My cousin and I have always been really close our whole lives, so it was nice getting to share his story and help keep that friend's sacrifice remembered. Not the typical altruistic life-saving event, but I'll go on. I'm an identical triplet. We started out as quadruplets, but the fourth little homie took one for the team as he stopped developing sometime during my mother's pregnancy. This allowed the remaining clones to develop healthy and well, utilizing the nutrients that would have been split by 4 down to 3. Pouring one out for you, Max. Edit. There are a lot of triplets on Reddit.
My brother died for me 13 years ago yesterday. We were alone at a beach in Mexico, no lifeguards, while our dad was taking care of some business. The water had been rough the day before, but my brother wanted to take a swim, so we went in anyway. Messing around in the water with one of those disposable underwater cameras, we got distracted and didn't realize how far we'd been pulled out. Suddenly we realized we were in a rip current and how big the waves around us were. Tried to swim back but couldn't, and at this point I'm panicking, yelling for help, and telling my brother I don't want to die. He says I won't, stays with me, and yells for help. Someone at one of the beachside restaurants finally notices us and jumps into the water with a boogie board. They swim up to us and tell us to hang on to the board. My brother and I are holding hands and the board, together. One wave later and we're ripped apart. That was the last time I saw him. I live for him every day. He was and is my best friend.
I'm late to the party, so many won't see this, but I wanted to put this out there. Obvious throwaway because people know my personal account and I'm not ready to talk about it with most people. Most details are intentionally made ambiguous. The irony that I'm posting it here for everyone is not lost on me. I was in Afghanistan in 2011, working in humanitarian assistance/humanitarian analysis. I was working in the southern part of a city in the southeast of the country, working in various villages/communities over the course of a few weeks. I have Middle Eastern/Southwest Asian features, so the Afghans took a liking to me. I got to know one village community particularly well, to the point that one of the younger boys, about 13, would always walk with me holding my hand, a sign of friendship in their culture. We'd talk about life in America, what his life was like in his Afghanistan, what he wanted to be when he grew up, basic crap, nothing serious. I left that community to work in other parts of the region for a little while with the intention of coming back for one more visit before I went back to HQ to write reports and crap. So I go back for that one visit to find the community cold to me, which is very unusual in Pashtunwali. Pashtuns is the ethnicity of the people in the area. Pashtunwali is like their ethnic code of conduct. As we're leaving the area, we found the body of the kid that was hanging out with me. He was executed by gunshot and left to rot in a ditch. He didn't die for me in the sense that he sacrificed himself for my sake. Rather, he died for being my friend. The people of that community refused to speak to any NATO forces after that.
My best friend killed herself because of me. I was always her go-to, her only friend. She was constantly mentally ill, and from the time I was 10 until I was 14 my life revolved around helping her and our other friend. Our other friend turned out to be lying about everything for kicks and craps, whatever, that's another story. So it was just us. She confessed she was in love, had a crush, whatever, with me when we were 13. I was dating someone else and I kept the fact I was gay hidden to even myself until I was around 15. So I rejected her but said we can still be friends. She was heartbroken. One day I went out with my family and she texted me a suicide note. She's done this before but I was just so tired. I just wanted to spend time with my family. And then I came home and tried to message her. Nothing. Kept trying. Nothing. Called the police as I'd done many times previous, and she was discovered with a knife in her neck, self-inflicted. She'd actually killed herself this time. Her parents blame me and hate me. They used to send me death threats / say it should have been me and not their little girl, and I wasn't allowed to attend the funeral. Only recently did I get the bravery to visit her grave. I'm still I don't know. I'm not an alcoholic as in I rarely drink, but every year during the week of her anniversary I'm crap-faced and depressed and don't talk to anyone, don't attend school. I think I've just kept pushing it down, but I see her everywhere and I hear her in all my songs and it's just tough. Sorry for the rant. I'm not looking for pity or anything, and I know the whole people choose to take their lives, it's not your fault, but I don't think, in this case, I'll ever believe it's not my fault. Her suicide note was addressed to only me. Her suicide note was mostly about me. It was me. She died because of me. Edit. Wow, this is my most upvoted comment and my most depressing one. Lamau. Thank you guys for the supporting words. It's been a while since I've heard anyone be kind to me about this topic. I do have a therapist, and despite the guilt I think I'm doing okay. I rarely talk about this, so I mostly wrote this comment as a rant, and honestly I didn't think anyone would care, but the fact you have all commented and supported me despite what I personally believe about myself has brought genuine tears to my eyes. I'm working on turning this into a I'm living for both of us situation. It's just hard. I'm 18 now, so this was like 4 years ago. Thank you again for saying all these kind things, sharing your personal experiences, and everything else.
This won't be the same, but this is all I have. My pappy was the best man I've ever known. He was the definition of a great dad. He met my mom and they started going out. They had their ups and downs like all couples, especially since my dad did drugs. 6 months in, a little accident happened. My brother. Most guys would have dipped, but he didn't. He sobered up as soon as he found out. Not only that, but he was willing to stay even though my mom already had 10 kids. Things were going great and they ended up having 2 more kids, 13 in all, me being the youngest, his baby girl. Then he started getting sick. He was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. Since I was so young I wasn't in school yet and he was so sick he couldn't work. We spent all day every day together. He was my best friend. I still remember eating Fruity Pebbles out of the box, watching Sesame Street with him in the living room. He loved fishing, playing guitar, and listening to classic heavy metal. My dad was the life of the party. Even if there wasn't a party, he could make anyone laugh about anything. He was holding the family together, because my older siblings didn't have their dad. He had died 2 or 3 years before my mom met my dad. He stepped in and took the job. He treated them as if they were his own. The cancer started getting a lot worse and he wasn't able to eat a lot. The doctors urged him to start chemo and other kinds of therapy, but he knew that it'd only make him sicker. He knew he was gonna die and that chemo would only prolong it. He knew that if he started losing his hair, that's when the dark realization would hit the kids. Instead, he would take each of us one by one and have long conversations with us. I don't remember what he would tell us because I was so young and I never asked my siblings, because I think each message was something personal. My dad sacrificed himself so that the family would keep it together. He denied chemo so that we didn't have to watch our dad fall apart. He did so that the memories I did have of him were as sweet as the Fruity Pebbles we ate together.
Rwandan genocide survivor here. I lost my dad during the Rwandan genocide when I was 4 years old. He died protecting my sister, my mother, and me. The genocide was basically between 2 tribes, Hutus and Tutsis. My parents were each from different tribes. To make a long story short, both tribes were willing to take all of us in. But the nonverbal agreement was that the parent that wasn't from the appropriate tribe would be dealt with. Not wanting my mom to die, my dad chose to bring us to her tribe's side of the conflict, thus sealing his own death in the process. He was taken to some woods somewhere and he had his head chopped off. What always gets to me is my mom telling me how he silently cried as he was taken away.
Not exactly what you're looking for, but this past summer my family discovered that my beloved uncle had in fact embezzled the bulk of my grandparents' funds, $600K, over the last 9 years of managing their financial affairs. When I confronted him, he arranged to meet me the next day to turn over records. Instead, he wrote a note blaming me, and overdosed in the place we were supposed to meet. About an hour before the meeting, it's only by sheer chance that his wife found him instead of me. His wife 100% blames me for causing his death. It's been a lot to process. Edit. Wow, I didn't expect this to get so much attention. Thank you all for taking the time to send me your kind words. It means a lot. I have been getting some counseling to handle the fallout of it all. While I know that it wasn't technically my fault, knowing that his last act on earth was to direct malicious energy at me is a really painful reality. I loved him very much, but I've had to realize we never really knew him for who he was. While my aunt blames me, their kids don't. In fact, my cousin got into a huge fight with his mom defending me. I am grateful for his support. I only wish it wasn't necessary. The whole thing has been really hard.
My father. I was assaulted when I was 9, he confronted the man that did it, beat his ass. Man came back and shot him in the head. My mother has hated me ever since, so I lost 2 parents in one day. It has affected me in the sense that I'm hypervigilant in protecting my son. I have read the thread to this and would like to make something clear. I don't blame my mother because I understand some things about trauma. I do appreciate the kind words some have offered. Wow. Thank you, kind stranger. This is a bit overwhelming.
I've posted this on other threads before, but it's a story about my dad. It was winter time when I was 10, my father and I were walking across the ice covering the canal across from his house. I believe we were going for lunch. Before I realized what was going on, the ice broke from under us, and after some time of struggling to stay afloat, someone had finally noticed us in the water, encircled with ice. The guy threw an extension cord out to us. My dad told me to grab hold of it, and he pushed hard on me to get me up on the ice so the guy could pull me to shore. As he pushed up on me, I looked back to see his face disappear under the water. That was the last time I ever saw him.